The woods were quiet, too quiet. The man walked slowly, his boots crunching on the dry leaves. He had come out here to clear his head, to escape the noise of the world. But now, the silence felt heavy, like the forest was holding its breath. He stopped, listening. Something was wrong. A low whimper broke the stillness. It was faint, almost like the wind, but it sent a chill down his spine. He turned, scanning the trees. The sound came again, louder this time. It was coming from a thick bush a few feet away. He hesitated. He wasn't the kind of man who went looking for trouble. But something about that sound, it wasn't just an animal. It was different. He stepped closer, pushing the branches aside. And there it was. At first, he thought it was a dog. A large, strange-looking dog. Its fur was a mix of black and silver, shimmering faintly in the dim light. But as he looked closer, he realized it wasn't a dog at all. Its body was too sleek, its eyes too bright. They glowed a soft blue, like tiny stars. And its ears, they were pointed, almost like a fox's, but longer, more delicate. The creature was hurt. Its side was bleeding, a deep gash that looked fresh. It lifted its head, those glowing eyes locking onto his. For a moment, neither of them moved. The man felt a strange pull, like the creature was speaking to him without words. It wasn't fear he felt, it was something else. Curiosity. Compassion. "Hey," he said softly, crouching down. "It's okay. I'm not gonna hurt you." The creature whimpered again, its body trembling. The man reached out slowly, his hand hovering just above its head. The creature didn't pull away. It watched him, its eyes filled with something he couldn't quite understand. Trust? Hope? He didn't know. But he couldn't leave it here. "All right," he said, more to himself than the creature. "Let's get you out of here." He took off his jacket, wrapping it carefully around the creature. It was lighter than he expected, its body warm against his arms. He carried it back to his truck, glancing over his shoulder as he walked. The forest still felt too quiet, too still. Like it was watching him. At home, he laid the creature on the couch, grabbing an old towel to clean its wound. The creature didn't fight him. It just watched, those glowing eyes following his every move. He cleaned the gash as best he could, wrapping it in a bandage. The creature let out a soft sigh, its body relaxing. "There," he said, sitting back. "That should help." The creature tilted its head, studying him. For a moment, he thought it might try to speak. But it just closed its eyes, resting its head on its paws. The man sat there, watching it. He didn't know what it was or where it had come from. But he knew one thing, this wasn't just an animal. It was something more. That night, he dreamed of strange lights in the sky and whispers he couldn't understand. He woke up with a start, his heart pounding. The room was dark, but he could see the creature's glowing eyes in the corner. It was sitting up, watching him. "You okay?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. The creature didn't answer. But as he lay back down, he heard it. A soft, almost musical sound, like a hum. It was soothing, calming. He closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. For the first time in years, he felt at peace. The next morning, he woke up to find the creature gone. The bandage was on the floor, clean and dry. No blood, no sign of the wound. He searched the house, calling out, but there was no answer. He was about to give up when he heard a noise in the kitchen. He walked in, stopping in the doorway. The creature was there, sitting by the fridge. It looked at him, then at the fridge, then back at him. It was almost expectant. "You're hungry?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. The creature tilted its head, its ears twitching. The man couldn't help but laugh. He opened the fridge, pulling out some leftover chicken. He set it on the floor, stepping back. The creature sniffed it, then began to eat, its movements careful, almost delicate. As he watched, he noticed something strange. The creature's fur seemed to shimmer more in the light, its body glowing faintly. And its eyes, they were brighter, more intense. It was like it was healing, growing stronger with every passing moment. "What are you?" he whispered. The creature looked up, its eyes meeting his. And then, for the first time, it spoke. Its voice was soft, almost human, but with a strange, otherworldly tone. "You shouldn't have brought me here." The man froze, his heart skipping a beat. The creature's voice echoed in the small kitchen, soft but clear. It wasn't a growl or a bark, it was words. Real words. He stared at the creature, his mind racing. Had he imagined it? No. The creature was looking right at him, its glowing eyes steady, almost human. You can talk," he stammered, taking a step back. The creature tilted its head, its ears twitching. "Yes," it said simply. Its voice was calm, but there was a weight to it, like it knew something he didn't. The man rubbed his face, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't possible. Creatures didn't talk. Not like this. Not with words that sounded so intelligent. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "Okay," he said slowly. "If you can talk, then tell me, what are you? And why shouldn't I have brought you here?" The creature stood, its movements smooth and graceful. It was taller than he'd realized, its body lean and powerful. It walked toward him, stopping a few feet away. Its glowing eyes seemed to pierce through him, like it could see into his soul. "I am not from this world," it said. "I came here by accident. My ship was damaged, and I crashed in the woods. I was injured, weak. You found me and brought me here. But now, they will come." The man's stomach dropped. "They? Who's they?" The creature hesitated, as if choosing its words carefully. "They are hunters. Dangerous. They have been chasing me for a long time. If they find me here, they will not stop until they have what they want. And they will hurt anyone who gets in their way." The man felt a cold knot of fear tighten in his chest. This was too much. Aliens? Hunters? It sounded like something out of a movie. But the creature in front of him was real. Its voice, its eyes, its presence, it was all too real. "Why are they chasing you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The creature looked away, its ears drooping slightly. "I have something they want. Something powerful. If they get it, they will use it to destroy. I cannot let that happen." The man sat down heavily on a kitchen chair, his mind spinning. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know what to believe. But one thing was clear. This creature, whatever it was, needed his help. And whether he liked it or not, he was already involved. "What's your name?" he asked after a long silence. The creature blinked, as if surprised by the question. "I do not have a name like you do. But you called me Pup. I will answer to that." The man almost smiled. "Pup, huh? I guess that works." Pup tilted its head again, studying him. "You are not afraid?" The man shrugged. "I don't know what I am. But I know you're not here to hurt me. And if what you're saying is true, then I guess I'm in this with you." Pup's ears perked up, and for the first time, the man thought he saw something like gratitude in its eyes. "Thank you," it said softly. Over the next few days, the man and Pup began to form a strange but strong bond. Pup stayed hidden during the day, keeping to the shadows of the house. But at night, it would sit with the man, talking in its soft, melodic voice. It told him about its world, a place of endless skies and glowing forests. It spoke of its people, advanced and peaceful, but now threatened by the hunters who sought their technology. The man listened, fascinated. He had never been one for stories, but Pup's words painted pictures in his mind. He could almost see the glowing forests, hear the hum of the advanced cities. It was beautiful, but also sad. Pup's world was far away, and it didn't know if it would ever return. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Pup turned to the man. "You have been kind to me," it said. "But I cannot stay here forever. I must repair my ship and leave before the hunters find me." The man nodded. He had been thinking the same thing. "What do you need? How can I help?" Pup's eyes glowed brighter for a moment. "There are parts one need to fix the ship. They are rare, but they can be found. I will need your help to get them." The man didn't hesitate. "Tell me what to do." Pup explained that the parts were scattered, hidden in places where the hunters wouldn't think to look. Some were in abandoned buildings, others in remote areas. It would be dangerous, but it was their only chance. The next morning, they set out on their first mission. Pup stayed hidden in the back of the truck, its glowing eyes watching the road. The man drove to an old warehouse on the edge of town, a place that had been abandoned for years. According to Pup, one of the parts was hidden there. As they approached the warehouse, the man felt a knot of tension in his chest. The place looked eerie, its windows broken, its walls covered in graffiti. He parked the truck a short distance away, turning to Pup. "Stay here," he said. "I'll go in and look around." Pup nodded, but its eyes were filled with concern. "Be careful." The man stepped out of the truck, his heart pounding. He made his way to the warehouse, his footsteps echoing in the empty lot. The door was half open, creaking in the wind. He pushed it open, stepping inside. The warehouse was dark, filled with shadows and the smell of rust. He pulled out a flashlight, scanning the room. There were old machines, broken furniture, and piles of junk. He didn't know what he was looking for, but Pup had described it as a small, glowing device. He searched for what felt like hours, his nerves on edge. Just as he was about to give up, he saw it, a faint glow coming from under a pile of debris. He rushed over, pulling the junk aside. There it was. A small, metallic device, glowing with a soft blue light. He picked it up, feeling a surge of relief. But as he turned to leave, he heard a noise behind him. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. Slowly, he turned around. Standing in the doorway were three men. They were dressed in black, their faces hidden behind masks. And in their hands, they held weapons, strange, glowing guns that looked like nothing he had ever seen. The man's heart raced. He clutched the device tightly, his mind racing. He had to get out of here. He had to warn Pup. But before he could move, one of the men spoke, his voice cold and menacing. "Give us the device," he said. "And maybe we'll let you live." The man stood frozen, his grip tightening on the glowing device. The three men in black blocked the only exit, their strange weapons aimed directly at him. The air felt heavy, charged with tension. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and fast, as his mind raced for a way out. "I said, give us the device," the leader repeated, his voice cold and unyielding. "This is your last chance." The man glanced around the warehouse, searching for an escape route. But the windows were too high, and the men were too close. He was trapped. His only hope was to stall for time. "What do you want with this thing?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "It's just a piece of junk." The leader stepped forward, his weapon glowing brighter. "Don't play dumb. You know what it is. And you know who we're after. Hand it over, and we might let you walk out of here." The man's mind raced. These men were the hunters Pup had warned him about. They were real, and they were dangerous. He couldn't let them get the device, or Pup. But he also couldn't fight them. Not alone. "All right," he said slowly, holding up the device. "Take it. But let me go." The leader smirked, stepping closer. "Smart move." As the man pretended to hand over the device, he suddenly threw it as hard as he could toward the far corner of the warehouse. The glowing object clattered against the floor, rolling into the shadows. The hunters turned instinctively, their weapons following the movement. It was the distraction he needed. The man bolted, sprinting toward the door. One of the hunters shouted, and a blast of energy whizzed past his ear, hitting the wall and sending sparks flying. He didn't look back. He just ran, his heart pounding in his chest. He burst out of the warehouse, the cold air hitting his face like a slap. The truck was just ahead, and he could see Pup's glowing eyes watching from the back. He jumped into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut and starting the engine. "Go!" Pup's voice came from the back, urgent and sharp. The man didn't need to be told twice. He hit the gas, the tires screeching as the truck lurched forward. In the rearview mirror, he saw the hunters running out of the warehouse, their weapons raised. Another blast of energy hit the ground near the truck, sending dirt and debris flying. "Hold on," the man shouted, swerving onto the main road. He drove as fast as he could, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. Pup crouched low in the back, its glowing eyes darting between the road and the hunters behind them. "They're following us," Pup said, its voice tense. The man glanced in the mirror. A black van was speeding after them, its headlights glaring. The hunters weren't giving up. "What do we do?" the man asked, his voice rising in panic. Pup hesitated, then said, "There's a forest up ahead. If we can lose them in the trees, we might have a chance." The man nodded, pushing the truck faster. The forest loomed in the distance, a dark mass of trees and shadows. He turned sharply onto a narrow dirt road, the truck bouncing over ruts and rocks. The van followed, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The forest closed in around them, the trees thick and dense. The man drove as fast as he dared, the truck weaving through the narrow path. Branches scraped against the sides, and the sound of the engine echoed through the trees. "They're still behind us," Pup said, its voice low. The man clenched his jaw, his mind racing. He couldn't keep this up forever. The truck wasn't built for this kind of terrain, and the hunters were relentless. He needed a plan. "Pup," he said suddenly, "can you do anything? Anything at all to stop them?" Pup was silent for a moment, then said, "I can try. But it will weaken me." "Do it," the man said firmly. "We don't have a choice." Pup nodded, its glowing eyes narrowing. It closed its eyes, its body beginning to shimmer with a soft blue light. The air around them seemed to hum, and the man felt a strange warmth spreading through the truck. Behind them, the van suddenly swerved, its tires skidding on the dirt road. The hunters shouted, their voices filled with confusion. The van hit a tree, its front end crumpling as it came to a stop. The man let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Did you do that?" Pup's glow faded, and it slumped down, its breathing heavy. "Yes. But I cannot do it again. Not for a while." The man nodded, slowing the truck to a stop. They were deep in the forest now, the trees thick and the road barely visible. He turned off the engine, the silence of the forest pressing in around them. "We need to hide," he said, climbing out of the truck. "They'll come after us on foot." Pup followed, its movements slower than usual. The man could tell it was exhausted, but there was no time to rest. They had to keep moving. They made their way deeper into the forest, the man leading the way. The ground was uneven, and the darkness made it hard to see. But Pup's glowing eyes provided just enough light to guide them. After what felt like hours, they found a small cave hidden among the trees. It was cramped and damp, but it would have to do. The man helped Pup inside, then sat down, his body aching with exhaustion. "We'll stay here for the night," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll figure out what to do in the morning." Pup nodded, its eyes dimming as it rested. The man leaned against the cave wall, his mind racing. He had so many questions, but for now, all he could think about was the danger they were in. The hunters were real, and they were ruthless. They wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. And if they found Pup? The man shook his head, pushing the thought away. He couldn't let that happen. He had to protect Pup, no matter what. As he sat there in the dark, listening to the sounds of the forest, he realized something. This wasn't just about helping Pup anymore. This was about survival. His and Pup's. And he wasn't going to give up without a fight. The cave was cold and damp, but it was safe, for now. The man sat against the rough stone wall, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. Pup lay nearby, its glowing eyes dim but still watchful. The forest outside was silent, the only sound the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. The man rubbed his face, trying to clear his mind. They couldn't stay here forever. The hunters would regroup and come after them again. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. "Pup," he said softly, breaking the silence. "We can't keep running. We need to figure out how to fix your ship and get you out of here." Pup lifted its head, its ears twitching. "I know. But it will not be easy. The parts we need are scattered, and the hunters will be watching for us." The man nodded. "Then we'll have to be smart about it. Tell me what we need, and we'll figure out how to get it." Pup hesitated, then said, "There are 3 more parts. One is in an old factory, another in a remote mountain cave, and the last, it is in a place I do not know. It was taken by the hunters." The man frowned. "So we'll have to steal it back from them?" "Yes," Pup said simply. "But it will be dangerous. They will not give it up easily." The man leaned back, thinking. This was getting more complicated by the minute. But he couldn't back out now. He had made a promise to help Pup, and he wasn't going to break it. "All right," he said finally. "We'll start with the factory. It's the closest, right?" Pup nodded. "Yes. But we must be careful. The hunters may already be there." The man stood, stretching his stiff muscles. "Then we'll go tonight. Less chance of running into them." Pup's eyes glowed brighter for a moment, and the man thought he saw something like gratitude in its gaze. "Thank you," it said quietly. "You are taking a great risk for me." The man shrugged, trying to sound casual. "What are friends for?" They spent the rest of the day preparing. The man used his phone to look up the location of the old factory, while Pup rested, regaining its strength. As the sun began to set, they set out, moving quietly through the forest. The factory was about an hour's walk from the cave. It was an abandoned building, its windows broken and its walls covered in graffiti. The man and Pup approached cautiously, staying in the shadows. "The part is inside," Pup whispered. "But we must be quick." The man nodded, his heart pounding. He could feel the tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. They slipped through a broken window, the glass crunching softly under their feet. Inside, the factory was dark and eerie. The air smelled of rust and decay, and the floor was littered with debris. Pup's glowing eyes provided just enough light to see by, but it also made the shadows seem deeper, more menacing. "This way," Pup said, leading the man through the maze of machinery and broken equipment. They moved quickly but quietly, their footsteps barely making a sound. Finally, they reached a large room at the back of the factory. In the center of the room was a strange, glowing device, similar to the one the man had found in the warehouse. It was mounted on a pedestal, surrounded by wires and tubes. "That's it," Pup said, its voice filled with relief. "We just need to." Before Pup could finish, the room was suddenly flooded with light. The man shielded his eyes, his heart racing. When he looked up, he saw them, the hunters. They were standing in the doorway, their weapons aimed directly at him and Pup. Well, the leader said, stepping forward. "Looks like we caught ourselves a couple of thieves." The man's mind raced. They were trapped. The hunters had them cornered, and there was no way out. He glanced at Pup, hoping for some kind of plan, but Pup's eyes were fixed on the hunters, its body tense. "Give us the device," the leader said, his voice cold and menacing. "And maybe we'll let you live." The man clenched his fists, his fear turning to anger. He wasn't going to let these men win. Not without a fight. "You want it?" he said, stepping in front of Pup. "Come and take it." The leader smirked, raising his weapon. "Your choice." But before he could fire, Pup suddenly lunged forward, its body glowing with a bright, blinding light. The hunters shouted, shielding their eyes as Pup unleashed a burst of energy. The force of it knocked the hunters off their feet, sending them crashing to the ground. "Run!" Pup shouted, its voice strained. The man didn't hesitate. He grabbed the glowing device and bolted, Pup close behind. They ran through the factory, the sound of the hunters' shouts echoing behind them. The man's heart pounded in his chest, his legs burning with effort. They burst out of the factory, the cool night air hitting them like a slap. The man kept running, not daring to look back. He could hear the hunters behind them, their footsteps heavy and fast. "This way," Pup said, leading the man into the trees. They weaved through the forest, the darkness making it hard to see. But Pup's glowing eyes guided them, and the man followed without question. Finally, they reached a small clearing. The man stopped, gasping for breath. He turned to Pup, his eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. "Are they still behind us?" he asked, his voice shaking. Pup listened for a moment, then shook its head. "No. We lost them." The man let out a breath, his body sagging with relief. He sat down on the ground, clutching the glowing device tightly. Pup sat beside him, its breathing heavy. "That was close," the man said, his voice barely above a whisper. Pup nodded, its eyes dimming. "Yes. But we have the part. That is what matters." The man looked at Pup, his heart swelling with a strange mix of emotions. Fear, relief, and something else, something he couldn't quite name. He had risked his life for Pup, and he didn't regret it. Not for a second. "We'll get through this," he said firmly. "Together." Pup's eyes glowed softly, and for the first time, the man thought he saw something like a smile on its face. "Together," it echoed. The man and Pup rested in the clearing for what felt like hours, their bodies aching and their minds racing. The glowing device sat between them, a small but crucial victory. But the man knew they couldn't stop now. The hunters were still out there, and they wouldn't give up easily. "We need to keep moving," the man said, his voice low. "They'll be searching for us." Pup nodded, its glowing eyes scanning the trees. "Yes. But we must be careful. They will not let us get away again." The man stood, his legs still shaky from the adrenaline. He picked up the device, tucking it into his jacket. "Where to next?" "The mountain cave," Pup said. "It is far, but we can reach it by morning if we move quickly." The man nodded, determination settling over him. They had come this far. He wasn't going to let the hunters stop them now. They set off through the forest, moving as quietly as they could. The night was dark, the moon hidden behind thick clouds. Pup's glowing eyes provided just enough light to guide them, but it also made them more visible. The man couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they walked, the man's mind wandered. He thought about his life before all of this, before Pup. It had been simple, predictable. But now he was risking everything for a creature he barely knew. And yet, he didn't regret it. Pup had become more than just a responsibility. It had become a friend. Pup, he said quietly, breaking the silence. When this is over, when you're safe, what will you do? Pup was silent for a moment, then said, I will return to my world. But I will not forget you. You have shown me kindness and courage. That is rare. The man smiled faintly. I'll miss you, you know. Pup's eyes glowed softly. And I will miss you. They walked in silence after that, the weight of their bond hanging in the air. But the moment was short-lived. As they approached the edge of the forest, the man heard a noise, a faint rustling, like footsteps. He froze, his heart pounding. Pup, he whispered, do you hear that? Pup's ears twitched, its body tense. Yes. They are close. Before the man could react, a bright light suddenly flooded the area, blinding him. He stumbled back, shielding his eyes. When his vision cleared, he saw them, the hunters. They were surrounding them, their weapons raised. Got you, the leader said, a cruel smile on his face. The man's heart raced. He glanced at Pup, but Pup was already moving, its body glowing with a fierce light. It lunged at the hunters, knocking two of them to the ground. But there were too many. One of the hunters fired his weapon, and a blast of energy hit Pup, sending it crashing into a tree. Pup, the man shouted, his voice filled with panic. He tried to run to Pup, but the hunters grabbed him, their grip like iron. He struggled, but it was no use. They were too strong. Let me go, he shouted, his voice raw with anger. The leader stepped forward, his weapon aimed at the man's chest. You've caused us enough trouble. But don't worry, we'll take care of your little friend. The man's heart sank. He looked over at Pup, who was lying motionless on the ground. Its glow was faint, almost gone. He felt a surge of desperation, but there was nothing he could do. The hunters dragged him away, their voices cold and mocking. The man's mind raced, trying to think of a way out. But he was trapped. And without Pup, he didn't stand a chance. They took him to a small, hidden camp deep in the forest. It was a makeshift base, filled with strange equipment and glowing devices. The man was thrown into a metal cage, the door slamming shut behind him. Enjoy your stay, the leader said with a smirk before walking away. The man sat in the cage, his mind spinning. He had to get out. He had to help Pup. But how? Hours passed, the night dragging on. The man's hope began to fade. He was alone, trapped, and helpless. But just as he was about to give up, he heard a noise, a soft, familiar hum. He looked up, his heart leaping. There, in the shadows, was Pup. Its glow was faint, but it was alive. The man's eyes filled with relief. Pup, he whispered, his voice trembling. You're okay. Pup crept closer, its movements slow and careful. I am weak, it said softly. But I could not leave you. The man's chest tightened with emotion. How did you find me? I followed your scent, Pup said. But we must be quick. The hunters will return soon. Pup used its remaining strength to melt the lock on the cage, the metal sizzling and sparking. The door creaked open, and the man stepped out, his legs shaky. Thank you, he said, his voice filled with gratitude. Pup nodded, its eyes dim but determined. We must go. But first, we need to take something. The man frowned. What? Pup led him to a small table in the corner of the camp. On it was the final part they needed, a glowing, cylindrical device. The man's eyes widened. That's it, he said, his voice filled with awe. The last part. Pup nodded. Take it. But be careful. It is fragile. The man picked up the device, his hands trembling. He tucked it into his jacket, his heart racing. They were so close. Just one more step, and they could fix the ship. But as they turned to leave, the camp was suddenly flooded with light. The hunters had returned, their weapons raised and their faces filled with anger. You're not going anywhere, the leader said, his voice cold and menacing. The man's heart sank. They were trapped again. But this time, there was no escape. Or so he thought. Pup stepped forward, its body glowing with a fierce, blinding light. The hunters shouted, shielding their eyes as Pup unleashed a burst of energy. The force of it knocked the hunters off their feet, sending them crashing to the ground. Run! Pup shouted, its voice strained. The man didn't hesitate. He bolted, Pup close behind. They ran through the camp, the sound of the hunters' shouts echoing behind them. The man's heart pounded in his chest, his legs burning with effort. They burst out of the camp, the cool night air hitting them like a slap. The man kept running, not daring to look back. He could hear the hunters behind them, their footsteps heavy and fast. This way. Pup said, leading the man into the trees. They weaved through the forest, the darkness making it hard to see. But Pup's glowing eyes guided them, and the man followed without question. Finally, they reached a small clearing. The man stopped, gasping for breath. He turned to Pup, his eyes wide with fear and adrenaline. Are they still behind us? He asked, his voice shaking. Pup listened for a moment, then shook its head. No. We lost them. The man let out a breath, his body sagging with relief. He sat down on the ground, clutching the final device tightly. Pup sat beside him, its breathing heavy. We did it, the man said, his voice filled with awe. We have all the parts. Pup nodded, its eyes dimming. Yes. But we must hurry. The hunters will not stop until they find us. The man looked at Pup, his heart swelling with a strange mix of emotions. Fear, relief, and something else, something he couldn't quite name. They had come so far, risked so much. And now, they were one step closer to freedom. Let's finish this, he said firmly. Pup's eyes glowed softly, and for the first time, the man thought he saw something like a smile on its face. Together. The man and Pup moved through the forest as quickly as they could, the final device safely tucked in the man's jacket. The sky was beginning to lighten, the first hints of dawn breaking through the trees. They had been running all night, and exhaustion was starting to take its toll. But they couldn't stop. Not yet. How much farther? The man asked, his voice hoarse. Not far, Pup said, its glowing eyes scanning the path ahead. The ship is hidden in a cave at the base of the mountain. We will be safe there. The man nodded, though his legs felt like they might give out at any moment. He pushed through the fatigue, focusing on the task at hand. They were so close. Just a little farther, and they could fix the ship. Just a little farther, and Pup would be safe. Finally, they reached the mountain. The cave was hidden behind a thick curtain of vines, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. Pup led the way inside, its glow illuminating the dark, damp walls. The man followed, his heart pounding with a mix of hope and fear. In the center of the cave was the ship. It was smaller than the man had expected, sleek and silver, with strange symbols etched into its surface. It looked like something out of a sci-fi movie, but it was real. And it was their only chance. This is it, Pup said, its voice filled with relief. We can repair it now. The man set the final device on the ground, along with the other parts they had collected. Pup began to work, its movements quick and precise. It used its glowing energy to fuse the parts together, the ship humming softly as it came back to life. The man watched in awe. He had never seen anything like this. The way Pup moved, the way it used its energy, it was incredible. But he also noticed how weak Pup was becoming. Its glow was dimmer, its movements slower. The strain was taking its toll. "Pup," he said softly, "are you going to be okay?" Pup nodded, but its voice was strained. "I will be fine. But we must hurry. The hunters will find us soon." The man's chest tightened. He didn't want to think about the hunters. Not now. Not when they were so close. But he knew Pup was right. They were running out of time. As Pup worked, the man kept watch at the entrance of the cave. The forest was quiet, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig made his heart race. He clutched the makeshift weapon he had fashioned from a piece of metal, his knuckles white. "How much longer?" he called over his shoulder. "Almost done," Pup replied, its voice faint. The man nodded, though his nerves were frayed. He glanced back at Pup, his heart aching. He had grown so attached to this strange, glowing creature. The thought of saying goodbye was almost too much to bear. Finally, Pup stepped back, its glow flickering weakly. "It is finished. The ship is ready." The man let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "That's great, Pup. Now we just need to." Before he could finish, a loud crash echoed through the cave. The man spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. The hunters had found them. "Pup," he shouted, his voice filled with panic. The hunters burst into the cave, their weapons raised. The leader stepped forward, his face twisted into a cruel smile. "You thought you could escape us? You thought you could win?" The man stepped in front of Pup, his makeshift weapon raised. "Stay back." The leader laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You're brave, I'll give you that. But you're also stupid. You can't win this." The man's mind raced. He had to protect Pup. He had to buy them time. But how? "Pup," he said quietly, "get to the ship. I'll hold them off." Pup's eyes widened. "No. I cannot leave you." "You have to," the man said firmly. "This is your only chance. Go." Pup hesitated, its glowing eyes filled with conflict. But then it nodded, its body shimmering faintly. "Thank you," it said softly. "For everything." The man's chest tightened, but he didn't have time to respond. The hunters were advancing, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. He tightened his grip on the metal rod, his heart pounding. "Come on, then," he shouted, his voice filled with defiance. The hunters opened fire, blasts of energy lighting up the cave. As he walked out of the cave, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the trees, he felt a strange sense of peace. He had risked everything for Pup, and he didn't regret it. Not for a second. Because sometimes, the greatest adventures come from the most unexpected friendships. The man stood at the edge of the forest, watching the sky long after Pup's ship had disappeared. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the trees, but the man felt no warmth. His shoulder ached where the hunter's blast had hit him, but the pain in his chest was far worse. Pup was gone. And with it, a part of him felt empty. He turned away from the sky, his mind racing. The hunters were still in the cave, but they were no longer a threat. Without Pup, they had no reason to stay. The man knew he should leave too, before they regained their strength. But he couldn't bring himself to move. Not yet. As he stood there, lost in thought, a faint sound reached his ears. It was soft, almost like a whisper, but it sent a chill down his spine. He turned, his eyes scanning the trees. The sound came again, louder this time. It was coming from the cave. The man's heart raced. He didn't want to go back in there. But something about the sound, it wasn't human. It was familiar. "Pup," he whispered, his voice trembling. He hesitated, then slowly made his way back to the cave. The entrance was dark, the vines hanging like a curtain. He pushed them aside, stepping inside. The cave was quiet, the only sound the faint drip of water from the walls. And then he saw it. In the corner of the cave, barely visible in the dim light, was a small, glowing object. It was Pup's energy, a faint, pulsing light that seemed to call to him. The man's breath caught in his throat. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Pup," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. The light pulsed softly, as if in response. The man knelt down, reaching out to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed against the light, a wave of warmth spread through him. Images flashed in his mind, Pup's glowing eyes, its soft voice, the bond they had formed. And then, a single word, clear and unmistakable. "Help." The man's eyes filled with tears. Pup wasn't gone. Not completely. A part of it was still here, trapped and weak. And it needed him. He carefully picked up the glowing object, cradling it in his hands. It was warm, like a living thing, and it pulsed gently, as if breathing. The man's mind raced. He didn't know how to help Pup, but he knew he had to try. He left the cave, the glowing light safely tucked in his jacket. The forest was quiet, the hunters nowhere to be seen. He made his way back to his truck, his heart heavy but determined. He had to find a way to save Pup. He couldn't let it die. When he reached the truck, he set the glowing light on the passenger seat, its soft glow illuminating the interior. He sat there for a moment, staring at it. What could he do? He wasn't a scientist or an engineer. He was just a man. But he had to try. He started the engine, his mind made up. He would take Pup's energy to the only place he could think of, the old factory where they had found the second device. Maybe there was something there that could help. The drive felt like an eternity. The man's shoulder throbbed with pain, but he ignored it. His focus was on the glowing light, its pulse growing fainter with every passing mile. He had to hurry. When he reached the factory, he parked the truck and carefully carried the light inside. The place was just as they had left it, dark, eerie, and filled with shadows. But the man didn't care. He had a mission. He set the light on a table, his eyes scanning the room. There had to be something here, some piece of equipment that could help. He searched through the debris, his hands trembling with urgency. Finally, he found it, a small, glowing device similar to the ones they had collected for Pup's ship. It was damaged, but maybe it could still work. He brought it over to the table, setting it next to the light. "Okay, Pup," he said softly. "Let's see if this works." He connected the device to the light, his hands shaking. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the light began to pulse brighter. The man's heart leapt with hope. "That's it," he whispered. "Come on, Pup." The light grew stronger, its glow filling the room. And then, something incredible happened. The light began to take shape, forming a familiar figure. It was Pup, but not as the man had known it. This Pup was smaller, its glow faint and flickering. But it was alive. "Pup," the man said, his voice filled with relief. "You're okay." Pup looked at him, its glowing eyes filled with gratitude. "You saved me," it said softly. "But I am weak. I cannot stay like this for long." The man's heart sank. "What can I do? How can I help you?" Pup hesitated, then said, "There is one way. But it will require a great sacrifice." The man didn't hesitate. "Tell me." Pup's eyes glowed softly. "You must give me some of your energy. It will allow me to survive, but it will weaken you. You may not recover." The man stared at Pup, his mind racing. He knew what Pup was asking. It was a risk, a big one. But he also knew he couldn't let Pup die. Not after everything they had been through. Do it, he said firmly. Take what you need. Pup's eyes filled with something like sadness. Are you sure? The man nodded, his voice steady. I'm sure. Pup hesitated, then reached out, its glowing hand touching the man's chest. A warm, tingling sensation spread through him, like a gentle wave. He felt his strength draining, his body growing weaker. But he didn't fight it. He let Pup take what it needed. Finally, Pup pulled away, its glow brighter and more stable. The man slumped against the table, his legs shaky. He felt weak, like he had just run a marathon. But he didn't care. Pup was alive. Thank you, Pup said softly, its voice filled with emotion. You have given me a second chance. The man forced a smile, though his body felt heavy. What are friends for? Pup's eyes glowed with warmth. You are more than a friend. You are family. The man's chest tightened with emotion. He had never felt so connected to anyone, or anything, in his life. Pup had changed him, in ways he couldn't fully understand. And he knew he would do it all over again, if he had to. What now? He asked, his voice faint. Pup looked at him, its glow steady. Now, we finish what we started. Together. The man nodded, though his body felt like it might give out at any moment. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing, he wasn't alone. And as long as he had Pup by his side, he could face anything. The man and Pup returned to the cave at the base of the mountain, the place where Pup's ship had been hidden. The man's body was weak, his energy drained from the sacrifice he had made to save Pup. But his determination was stronger than ever. They had come too far to give up now. Pup's glow was steady, its strength restored thanks to the man's energy. But it was clear that Pup was still not at full power. The hunters were still out there, and they would come for them again. The man knew they had to be ready. We need a plan, the man said, his voice faint but firm. We can't just wait for them to find us. Pup nodded, its glowing eyes scanning the cave. We must defend this place. If they destroy the ship, all will be lost. The man looked around, his mind racing. The cave was a natural fortress, with only one entrance. If they could fortify it, they might stand a chance. But they were just two, well, 1.5, given the man's weakened state, against an unknown number of hunters. They needed an advantage. Pup, the man said, can you use your energy to create some kind of barrier? Something to slow them down? Pup's ears twitched as it considered the idea. Yes. But it will take time, and it will weaken me further. The man nodded. Do it. I'll handle the rest. Pup began to work, its body glowing brighter as it channeled its energy into the cave's entrance. The air seemed to hum with power, and a faint, shimmering barrier began to form. The man watched in awe, though his heart ached at the strain Pup was under. While Pup worked, the man gathered whatever he could find to fortify their position. He dragged heavy rocks to block the entrance, creating a makeshift barricade. He also collected sharp sticks and pieces of metal, fashioning them into crude weapons. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. As the hours passed, the cave began to feel like a fortress. Pup's barrier was complete, a shimmering wall of energy that pulsed softly in the dim light. The man's barricade was sturdy, though he knew it wouldn't hold forever. They were as ready as they could be. Pup, the man said, his voice soft, if this doesn't work, if they get through. I want you to know something. Pup turned to him, its glowing eyes filled with warmth. What is it? The man took a deep breath, his chest tight with emotion. You've changed my life. I was just existing before I met you. But now now I feel like I'm really living. And no matter what happens, I'm glad I got to know you." Pup's eyes glowed brighter, and for a moment, the man thought he saw something like tears in them. "You have given me more than I can ever repay. You are my family. And I will fight for you, no matter the cost." The man nodded, his throat tight. He didn't trust himself to speak. Instead, he reached out, placing a hand on Pup's head. Pup leaned into the touch, its glow steady and warm. The moment was shattered by a loud crash outside the cave. The man's heart leapt into his throat. The hunters had found them. "They're here," Pup said, its voice tense. The man grabbed his makeshift weapons, his hands trembling but steady. He took his position behind the barricade, his eyes fixed on the entrance. Pup stood beside him, its body glowing with a fierce light. The hunters burst into view, their weapons raised and their faces filled with anger. The leader stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he saw the barrier. "You think this will stop us?" he sneered. "You're even more foolish than I thought." The man didn't respond. He tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart pounding. The hunters opened fire, blasts of energy hitting the barrier. The shimmering wall held, but it flickered with each impact. "They're weakening it," Pup said, its voice strained. "It will not hold for long." The man nodded, his mind racing. They had to act fast. "Pup, can you use your energy to attack them?" Pup hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. But it will drain me." "Do it," the man said firmly. "We don't have a choice." Pup stepped forward, its body glowing brighter. It unleashed a burst of energy, the force of it knocking several hunters off their feet. The man cheered, but his joy was short-lived. The barrier flickered again, weaker this time. The hunters regrouped, their weapons glowing brighter. They fired again, and this time, the barrier shattered. The man's heart sank as the hunters charged forward, their weapons raised. "Get back," the man shouted, swinging his makeshift weapon at the first hunter to reach the barricade. The man grunted in pain as the hunter's weapon grazed his arm, but he didn't stop. He fought with everything he had, his body fueled by adrenaline and determination. Pup was beside him, its glow flickering as it unleashed bursts of energy. The hunters shouted in anger and pain, but they kept coming. The man and Pup were outnumbered, and they both knew it. "Pup," the man shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "We can't hold them off much longer." Pup's eyes glowed with determination. "Then we must make our stand here." Pup's eyes glowed with determination. "Then we must make our stand here." The man nodded, though his heart ached. He didn't want to die, but he also couldn't let the hunters win. He swung his weapon again, hitting another hunter in the side. But the hunters were relentless, their weapons glowing with deadly energy. Just as it seemed like all was lost, Pup suddenly stepped forward, its body glowing with a fierce, blinding light. The man shielded his eyes, his heart racing. "Pup, what are you doing?" he shouted. Pup didn't respond. Instead, it unleashed a massive burst of energy, the force of it knocking the hunters off their feet and sending them crashing to the ground. The cave shook, rocks falling from the ceiling. The man stumbled, his ears ringing. When the light faded, the hunters were gone. The cave was silent, the only sound the man's ragged breathing. He looked at Pup, his heart filled with awe and fear. "Pup," he said softly. Pup's glow was faint, its body trembling. It turned to the man, its eyes filled with something like sadness. "I am sorry," it said softly. "But this is the only way." The man's chest tightened. "What are you talking about?" Pup's glow flickered, and the man realized what was happening. Pup had used all its energy to defeat the hunters. And now, it was fading. "No," the man said, his voice filled with panic. "No, Pup, you can't leave me." Pup's eyes glowed softly, its voice faint. "You have given me so much. Now, I give this to you. Be strong. Be brave. And remember, you are not alone." The man's eyes filled with tears as Pup's glow faded, its body dissolving into a soft, shimmering light. The light floated for a moment, then settled over the man, filling him with a warm, comforting energy. And then, Pup was gone. The man fell to his knees, his body trembling with grief. The cave was silent, the only sound the faint drip of water from the walls. He clutched the spot where Pup had been, his heart aching with loss. But as he sat there, he felt something, a faint pulse, like a heartbeat. He looked down, his eyes widening. The glowing light that had been Pup was still there, faint but steady. It was a part of Pup, a part that would always be with him. The man's chest tightened with emotion. Pup had sacrificed itself to save him, but it hadn't left him alone. It had given him a piece of itself, a piece that would always remind him of their bond. He stood, his body filled with a strange, newfound strength. The hunters were gone, but he knew there would be more challenges ahead. And he would face them, with Pup's light guiding him. Because sometimes, the greatest strength comes from the deepest bonds. The man stood in the cave, the faint glow of Pup's energy pulsing softly in his chest. The hunters were gone, defeated by Pup's final act of sacrifice. The cave was silent, but the man's heart was anything but quiet. He felt a mix of grief, gratitude, and determination. Pup had given everything to protect him, and he couldn't let that sacrifice be in vain. He took a deep breath, his body still weak but his spirit stronger than ever. The faint pulse of Pup's energy reminded him that he wasn't alone. Pup was still with him, in a way. And that gave him the strength to keep going. The man stepped out of the cave, the morning sun warming his face. The forest was peaceful, the birds chirping and the leaves rustling in the breeze. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, this place had been a battlefield. But the man knew the peace wouldn't last. The hunters might be gone, but there would always be more dangers. And he had to be ready. He made his way back to his truck, the faint glow in his chest guiding him like a beacon. As he drove, his mind wandered. He thought about everything he and Pup had been through, the moments of fear, the moments of triumph, and the bond they had formed. Pup had changed him in ways he couldn't fully explain. He had been just a man, living a simple life, before Pup came into his world. But now he was something more. When he reached his home, he stepped inside, the familiar surroundings feeling both comforting and strange. The house was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. The faint pulse of Pup's energy filled the space, a constant reminder of the friendship they had shared. The man sat down at the kitchen table, his mind racing. He knew he couldn't go back to the way things were before. Pup had shown him a world beyond his own, a world of courage, sacrifice, and connection. And he couldn't just forget that. As he sat there, he noticed something on the table, a small, glowing object. It was one of the devices they had collected for Pup's ship. He picked it up, his fingers brushing against its smooth surface. The device pulsed softly, as if responding to the energy in his chest. The man's eyes widened as an idea formed in his mind. He didn't know much about alien technology, but he knew one thing: Pup's energy was still alive, still a part of him. And maybe, just maybe, he could use it to honor Pup's memory. He spent the next few days working tirelessly, using the device and the faint glow in his chest to create something new. It wasn't easy, his body was still weak, and he had no idea what he was doing. But he didn't give up. He couldn't. Finally, after countless hours of trial and error, he finished. In his hands was a small, glowing orb, pulsing with the same energy that had once been Pup. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A way to keep Pup's memory alive. The man stepped outside, the orb glowing softly in his hands. He looked up at the sky, the stars twinkling in the night. He thought about Pup, about the bond they had formed and the sacrifices they had made. And he knew that Pup's journey wasn't over. Not really. "This is for you, Pup," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion. "You showed me what it means to be brave, to be selfless. And I won't forget that. Ever." He placed the orb on the ground, stepping back as it began to glow brighter. The light spread, filling the air with a soft, warm energy. And then, something incredible happened. The light began to take shape, forming a familiar figure. It was Pup, but not as the man had known it. This Pup was smaller, its glow faint but steady. It looked at the man, its glowing eyes filled with warmth. "You did it," Pup said softly, its voice filled with gratitude. "You brought me back." The man's eyes filled with tears, his heart swelling with emotion. "Pup. I thought I lost you." Pup stepped closer, its glow steady. "You never lost me. I was always with you. And now, I always will be." The man knelt down, his hand reaching out to touch Pup's head. The glow was warm, comforting. It felt like home. "What happens now?" the man asked, his voice trembling. Pup's eyes glowed softly. "Now, we continue. Together. There is still much to do, much to learn. And I will be by your side, every step of the way." The man nodded, his heart filled with a strange mix of emotions. He had lost Pup, but he had also found a part of himself. And now, with Pup's energy guiding him, he knew he could face whatever came next. As they stood there, the stars shining above them, the man realized something. Pup had taught him more than just courage and sacrifice. It had taught him the power of connection, of friendship. And that was something no one could ever take away. "Thank you, Pup," he said softly. "For everything." Pup's eyes glowed with warmth. "Thank you, my friend. For showing me what it means to be human." And as they stood there, the man knew that their journey was far from over. But he also knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Because sometimes, the greatest adventures come from the deepest bonds. And sometimes, the greatest lessons come from the most unexpected friendships.